Hello, I'm Omar Moore, and there is the 20th Century Fox opening logo. Isn't that great? I just love that. Welcome to this unofficial feature-length audio commentary for Lawrence Kasdan's 1991 drama Grand Canyon. We see these opening credits of the basketball rim and the director Lawrence Kasdan, and there's the basketball, and we've got some hands, black men's hands, and we are brought into an atmosphere of a playground where some young black men are playing basketball, and these credits of the actors are coming up: Danny Glover, Kevin Kline, and we get to see the actors, and we get to see Danny Glover right there. It's a really good sequence because it starts out black and white, and then boom, we're going to see this really hard edit in a few moments as the ball goes up on the rim again. And I love the editing of this movie. This black and white sequence is shot in Los Angeles. You've got a chain link fence there. You've got some competitors, and you've got the spectators watching this. And we see the opening title reveal the title of the film just through that chain link fence, that fence there, just over it, and the title Grand Canyon. And I love that. I love how it starts, and you get a sense of the atmosphere, that helicopter there hovering in this neighborhood, this poor neighborhood in, presumably, I guess, in South Central Los Angeles. It's now called South Los Angeles, I think. Bang. And watch this transition. Boom. Really lovely edit there to color, where we are inside the Los Angeles Forum, the LA Forum, with the Los Angeles Lakers. And there's Kevin Kline and Steve Martin. And we can see the LA Lakers' Magic Johnson taking on the Orlando Magic all by himself. Magic takes on the Magic. And he, is playing there. And at the time this movie came out, which was Christmas Day of 1991, Magic Johnson had, within, I guess, just 3 weeks before this movie came out, announced that he had contracted HIV. And that announcement at his press conference sent shockwaves through not only the National Basketball Association, but throughout the country. This sampling of Los Angeles life at the LA Hollywood Forum is typical, right? Because this is what happens. You have women walking back and forth, and the game may not be the priority of some of the women who are walking around. They are there to be seen. That is true of some of the women who attend these basketball games. It's far from true of every woman, of course. But you see the contrast between that opening black and white sequence and this sequence of a largely white audience looking at a group of black and white men playing basketball, but of course it's at the Forum. And that's the whole kind of atmosphere, this contrast, this Grand Canyon that Lawrence Kasdan sets up. This opening sequence afterwards, the first dialogue coming here with Steve Martin and Kevin Kline, and he's Steve Martin philosophizing about life and about fear and about what people are trying to control, which is fear. And I do think that Steve Martin's character, this film producer who doesn't know when to stop talking or making bad movies, is got a real point here about fear. And I don't think it's necessarily very cynical. I think he's actually onto something as a middle-aged man, in this case a middle-aged white man, giving this perspective that I think is very true in Los Angeles, but beyond Los Angeles is that people are trying to navigate their own fears because there's this fantasy world, particularly in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, you don't have to stop at a neighborhood. You can just drive past it on a freeway and never go down that exit in your lifetime because of what you hear about a certain neighborhood or neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And it gives you this freedom of being locked in your car as a certain kind of cage, immunized from the world. You don't have to deal with certain parts of the world in Los Angeles that you live in. You deal with the fantasy, the illusion of safety and comfort in your vehicle. That is complete car culture. Los Angeles is car culture. It's all about driving in your car and showing up an hour late to a meeting and blaming it on the traffic. For those of you who are proper Los Angelinos, please forgive me for my overly simplistic analysis of your city. I've been to it many times, I've driven through it many times, and I must say that, as someone living in San Francisco, I guess I get to take a shot at Los Angeles, but it's true, isn't it? Wouldn't you agree that that is part of the culture of Los Angeles, is to stay in your car and try to beat as much traffic as you can, but blame it on traffic if you're late somewhere? Okay, I've just skipped past a few things, but one thing is the traffic in the form that you just saw that Kevin Kline is trying to navigate himself out of. And here is Mary Mcdonald. And that is, I believe, Jeremy Sisto. My goodness me. He's completely unrecognizable later on. But this was 1991. So we're getting an idea of these two individuals. We don't necessarily know who they are connected to, but we will, of course, learn soon that they are connected to Kevin Kline and Kevin Kline's character connected to them. Mom, I think you need to get organized. She's got this rigidly organized set of things in front of her on a calendar. And here's this culture, right? This is the culture of Los Angeles. This is more of an anomaly in Los Angeles. Kevin Kline is driving, and there are a group of black men in a vehicle that I don't think we saw in the first group of people we saw on screen in the black and white sequence. Black men playing basketball. These are a group of black men who give dirty looks to Kevin Kline's character. And I think what you're seeing here now is a white man fearing that things may not go well, and his car is just gone kaput. His car is in Inglewood, a neighborhood that is impoverished, a neighborhood that does have issues with crime due to poverty, due to a system and a systemic world that is oppressive to black people and puts them in these very horrific situations of poverty. So as a result, things in Inglewood and other parts of America are not as good or as safe as they could be, not only for the residents, obviously, the black residents or the residents who are poor in that town, who may be poor black people, poor white people, is obviously not going to be necessarily the safest or best place for anyone else, including a well-off, well-to-do immigration lawyer. That seems like a kind of contradiction in terms. Named Mac, played by Kevin Kline. I think what Lawrence Kasdan is doing here is blurring the lines, the gulf between different groups of people in Los Angeles. And he, I think, is trying to bring these different groups of people together to tell us something, to instruct us somehow, to perhaps provide a lesson. One of the things that I think you should be aware of to give you some more context is that this film again was released in 1991. It was released on Christmas Day of that year, as I've alluded to earlier, on the coast, both in New York, where I first saw it on Christmas Day in 1991, on the first day it came out, and in Los Angeles. Now you have to remember that in Los Angeles in 1991, what happened? Two key events happened in 1991 in Los Angeles. Number one, on March the 5th of that year, Rodney King had been beaten by at least 20 police officers. I mean, it seemed like there was more than just the 4 white police officers who beat him. And those 4 were caught on camera. White man named George Holliday had his video camera. He was literally trying it out in the middle of the night, and he heard something going on outside his window. He opens his window, or at least looks through it, and he sees Rodney King, a black man, being beaten over and over and over again, tased for minutes and minutes and minutes, and he recorded the whole thing. That happened in March of 1991. Also that year, about a month later, if not roughly around the very same time, a young black teenager named Latasha Hollins, who was minding her own business, was in a store, was suddenly accused in the store by the Korean shopkeeper of that store of stealing. She didn't steal anything. She put her book bag on the counter. The orange juice that she was accused of stealing, put that on the counter. And she walked out. And as she turned to walk out of the store, the Korean shopkeeper reached across the counter with her gun and shot Latasha Hollins in the back of the head, killing her instantly. Latasha Hollins, I think, was about 15 years old, 15 or 16. Young black teenager, dead instantly. Those are the two things that you should know that happened in Los Angeles in 1991. So there's a contextual real life frame. And I don't know if Lawrence Kasdan was aware of those events while he was filming this movie, or if it was just a coincidence, because this movie, I think, was filmed in 1991. Much of it was. He may have started in 1990, but it was filmed in the year that it came out. What we've just been watching is Kevin Kline surrounded by these troublemakers, these young black men who are out looking for trouble. And it looks as if Kevin Kline is going to be the victim of a mugging in the Inglewood neighborhood, which is where the LA Forum is. And, nobody asks, why is a basketball arena or an entertainment complex always being put in a poor or black neighborhood? That never gets asked by most people. If you look across the United States, that is what happens. It's rarely in a rich neighborhood. Very, very rarely indeed do we see a baseball stadium or a basketball arena or a concert hall ever in a rich neighborhood. It's very rare indeed. Ask yourself why. Why is it always in a poor neighborhood? So Danny Glover is here as some kind of guardian angel, I think, because again, Kevin Kline is almost certainly going to be mugged by these 4 young black men who are looking for trouble. And there are troublemakers in every group of people. And on this occasion, it is these 4 black men, young men. They're probably, I'd say, about 17 or 18 years old, if that. And Danny Glover has come in as a tow truck driver, and he is literally coming in on a metaphorical white horse to save the day. Because normally in the movies, and this is a really good bait and switch by Lawrence Kasdan, because normally it's the white guy that is the one that comes in on the white horse and saves the day in the movies, right? The white savior, the white male savior. And there are still many of those in film. And in this particular film in 1991, the white male savior was the black male savior, which was Danny Glover's character, whose name is Simon. Normally, you'd expect his name to be Mac, but again, Lawrence Kasdan turns the tables and makes the Kevin Kline character Mac. I think that's all very deliberate. There's also something else that happened in 1991, and this rise in gangster rap came along. And the reason I mention it is because there was this whole culture in gangster rap perpetuated by music, the record industry, as well as the black rappers, some of whom bought into this really destructive and very toxic masculinity that treated women as objects. And the record industry was absolutely behind it too, rubber stamping all of it. And you've got this brother saying, you know, are you asking me to let me do my job here? Are you asking me as a sign of respect, Danny Glover, or are you asking me because I've got the gun? And it's these 5 or 6 black youths. I said 4. And Danny Glover says, you know, if you don't have the gun, we're not having this conversation. And the brother says to him, no gun, no respect. That's why I always got the gun. And that's part of also this culture in the rap music at the time in 1991, which was all about getting yours. I've got my 9 and I'm the man. I'm big and bad. I'll put a cap in your ass. I mean, that was the whole culture of rap music back then, gangster rap at least. So they let Danny Glover and Kevin Kline go. And the young brother says, look, you know, I'm doing you a favor and I want you to do me one in the future. Now, do you think that Danny Glover will do that is my question to you. Do you think that that favor will be returned in the future? One of the things about this movie that's a motif is the helicopter. I think you've noticed that by now. And the helicopter there serves as this transitional that goes from neighborhood to neighborhood. It's this thread that links each of these different neighborhoods together. Because in Los Angeles, everything is sprawled. It's all spread out. So you've got to come up with a way cinematically to render this needle and thread to stitch and knit these very disparate and different and sprawled out neighborhoods together. And how do you best represent that in a film? Well, you do it with a helicopter, right? I think that's a really smart way of doing it. There's another great technique here that you're going to see with the way there's a stitching together of this neighborhood, this black family and this black household. And we're going to see the television set. And then we're going to see this great transition that comes. And we're going to end up in a completely different home. I just love the editing here. It's really smart. And it's seamless. And we're going to see that coming up in a few moments in this scene. And again, we're introduced to this neighborhood, this household. We don't quite know where the relationship is, what these individuals that you see. Again, a mother and a son. We saw a white mother and son. Now we're seeing a black mother and son. And we don't know what their relationship is to anybody yet. But we're going to see that they are connected to Danny Glover and Danny Glover connected to them. We're going to see this transition coming up in a few moments. I really love it. I really do like this. What Carol Littleton did here. Watch this. This is the television. Watch what happens here. And we are in the home we saw earlier. They're watching that television. Both of these households in two different parts of Los Angeles are watching the same highlights of the Lakers game, which the Lakers ended up winning for what it's worth. And I just love that connectivity, that what happens there, what Carol Littleton does as an editor is stitch these experiences together that two different people are having at the same time in the same city, but they are miles and miles apart. But their experiences, in terms of at least watching the television, is very much the same. But that may be the only commonality between these black and white families that we've seen so far. So we see this new friendship being forged by Danny Glover and Kevin Kline's characters, and we see Mary Mcdonald here. I think there's a midlife crisis going on, and I'm going to explore that a little bit later on here. There's a lot of philosophizing in this film, and I actually like that. I think that philosophizing, if I can pronounce it correctly, is a good thing in the movies. Sometimes it can be spotted as pure BS, but sometimes on other occasions it is really something instructive and helpful for the sake of narrative, and for a way to keep an audience engaged and not send them to sleep. I think the philosophizing in this film that the people in it do, in this case Simon, Danny Glover's character, and we're going to hear some of it also from Kevin Kline's character Mac, is central to the movie. And it doesn't only express the view of the character, but it also expresses the view or the worldview of the director Lawrence Kasdan. I want to take a moment while they're talking here to talk about Lawrence Kasdan as a director. He had an extraordinary 11 years of filmmaking, and he, has directed films after this 11-year period I'm going to talk about. He had an extraordinary period from 1981, an 11-year period from 1981 to 1991. And that is 11 years. Just in case you thought I was losing my mind. In 1981, he made his directing debut with Body Heat, which was an erotic drama starring Kathleen Turner and William Hurt and Ted Danson. It's a stunning movie, and it was a really good debut movie. I remember seeing it when it came out. Whoa! Kathleen Turner just burned the screen down. It was a throwback to the 1940s and 50s. This noir movie that was like, whoa, it was really good. And erotic and electrifying and just combustible, and set in Miami, and the sweat and the sex and the heat and the everything. It was, wow, it was some movie. Then just 2 years later, he did The Big Chill, Lawrence Kasdan's, I think, his best film, The Big Chill. And Kevin Kline appeared in that movie. So did William Hurt. And Lawrence Kasdan uses some of the actors he works with more than twice. And that cast of The Big Chill was so good. Glenn Close and Jo Beth Williams and Meg Tilly. And oh man, it was a cast and a half. That was Tom Berenger. Man, there were so many really good people in that movie. And I think it was the best movie he's ever directed. Then after that, in 1985, he did Silverado. And that was a great movie. Danny Glover in that. Kevin Kline again in that. Kevin Kline was in The Big Chill as well. So Kevin Kline, I think, is the actor he has used the most. It was just a phenomenal decade, 11 years or so for Lawrence Kasdan. You know, he had this phenomenal stretch in the 1980s. He did a film after Silverado 3 years later in 1988 called The Accidental Tourist, another really good movie. William Hurt and Kathleen Turner again. Really good film, and it won Gina Davis an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. It's a good movie. So Lawrence Kasdan was at the top of his directing peak in the 1980s, and then he did a film called I Love You to Death in 1990 that starred Kevin Kline again. Hello, Kevin Kline again, the most used actor, I think, for sure, by Lawrence Kasdan. And then in 1991, Grand Canyon. That was the 11-year stretch. He's directed such films as Wyatt Earp after that, Mumford, and a number of others. But whoa, that 11-year stretch from 1981 through 1991 were the best 11 years of his directing career by far. All of those films I mentioned, including the film he did in 1990 called I Love You to Death, which is a comedy with Kevin Kline. I didn't think that film was one of his best movies, but it was still part of that staple of an 11-year stretch where he directed some really good things. Grand Canyon, I think, is actually a hugely underrated film. A lot of people, if I had to guess, would probably look at Grand Canyon as a schmaltzy, kind of idealistic, early 1990s film. Also, you've got to look at the fact that in 1991, another big event, but in the country, there was the Iraq War, the first Gulf War, I should say, that lasted, roughly 3 weeks or so, a month or so. The invasion that Saddam Hussein had in Kuwait. I put that word in quotes for lots of historical reasons. And then George H.W. Bush, who was president of the United States at the time, went in, sent in some troops. It was basically a weekend war, sent in American soldiers, it was basically a weekend war that lasted for a month. You had Norman Schwarzkopf, Stormin' Norman, the general Schwarzkopf, and you also had Colin Powell, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and away we go. And that also happened in 1991. This film now is the centerpiece for Mary Mcdonald, who also was having a pretty good career in the 90s. She had Dances with Wolves the year before this movie. She was nominated for an Oscar in the supporting actress category. She did not win. But this part now in this film, Grand Canyon, is her reliving moments of her earlier life when she was a mother, early on in her motherhood, looking at the same son that she has now said goodbye to, who's off to college. And it's these wistful moments and feelings and memories. And perhaps there's a part of a midlife crisis there, or there's an aging process. Just these memories now of how time has passed, and she's left isolated there. We're about to see a crime in progress. Steve Martin's about to be mugged. So he does get mugged, and Kevin Kline did not. But Steve Martin's character, Davis, who is this Hollywood producer, does. It's that nasty shot in the leg by someone who steals his Rolex. And Los Angeles is full of this, random crime that happens. I don't know if it's so much the case now per se, but back in 1991, things like that did happen. It was very casual. And now, look at all the blood and the guts and all the viscera. Oh, yeah. It's kind of like this comeuppance for Steve Martin's character, though, because Steve Martin's character, Davis, who is this Hollywood producer, Oh, look at all that. Isn't that just lovely? All that gristle and blood. But Steve Martin's character here has made all these schlocky movies of all the viscera and the blood and the gore, and now he's had this comeuppance, this shot in his leg, and this is something I guess is supposed to be a wake-up call for him. Here's Mary Mcdonald's character as she jogs here through the neighborhood. I can't help but think of Ahmaud Arbery, who jogged through a neighborhood in 2020 in Georgia, in the United States, and jogged literally on a Sunday afternoon. I don't know what day of the week this was, but it's clearly in the daytime. And this is a movie. In real life, Ahmaud Arbery, a young black man, jogged on a Sunday afternoon in a Georgia neighborhood, and he was murdered. He was executed by 3 white men. Talk about real life versus the movies. This is really a fantasy here. The idea that someone jogging would find a child like this in broad daylight. Usually a child is found in a dumpster. Oh God, but that's so true. And there's something fantastical about this. Even the lighting here suggests this kind of moment of dreamlike state. And the lighting here again, even in the house, looks extra bright and light, and this angelic halo that seems to come through this. And the character that was once reminiscing about how her son was just a baby 2 minutes ago and is now off to college or off to a camp retreat is now she's got this glow again. And her life, I guess the movie is saying this, Lawrence Kasdan may be saying this, her life has this kind of purpose again. And I guess there's something really sexist about that, because if I'm reading this correctly, or if I am stating this correctly, I guess what I'm saying is that the male director is suggesting that the character that Mary Mcdonald plays suddenly has this purpose because there's a baby in her life. And that seems really sexist to me, if that is the interpretation to be had. That somehow a woman is purposed, has her only purpose in life is rejuvenated by a child, as if a child is in her life. And that's, really sexist, because there's other things in a woman's life than a child, right? And that should be part of a man's life too, right? A child. We don't say that about men. And we see those interlocking hands just then. And that's Mary Louise Parker. Ooh. Oh, oh dear, I think that Mr. Kevin Kline is having an affair. That's pretty bold at work to be doing that. And these days, you wouldn't, or maybe you would, see that. And if you do see that, that's a problem, because it's harassment, it's sexual harassment. Even if it's consensual, it is. And if someone else sees that's not necessarily gonna be applauded, put it that way. So he's at the office speaking to his wife. They are married here. Mary Mcdonald and Kevin Kline are playing a married couple. And Mary Mcdonald's character is expressing just this remarkable sense of joy as she tells her husband about this child. Or at least she's about to. She's going to tell him when he gets home. But this child, whose child is it? We don't know. This child's been abandoned. And already look how quickly she takes to it. There's Danny Glover running up the steps as he goes there with his groceries. There he goes up the steps, and he's got 2 bags of groceries, and he's coming home, and there's like 2 or 3 bags of groceries, and he lays them down, and he's about to speak to his daughter here, and his daughter, by the way, is hard of hearing. So this is the device that he's communicating to her through. And I had never seen one of these before. But this is a device, I think these devices still exist. If someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But it was great to see this back in 1991. And this is the way that people who are hard of hearing, who are deaf, and there's a joke she tells there. What a lovely, beautiful person she is in the photo. It's just, this is the machine that a deaf person uses. It's only 9:30 in DC. Yeah. So she's on the East Coast, and it's kind of funny because he's in Los Angeles, kind of talking, communicating with her, and she's got this great sense of humor, his daughter, about not going out until midnight on a weeknight. That's when the party really starts. I love the music. James Newton Howard, I've not talked about the music. The score is just excellent. I think this is one of his best scores. I think it might be his best. I know some will disagree. I just love it. It's my favorite of his. And the transitions. The score just provides that transition, and the editing by Carol Littleton does the same. It's really effective here. We've just seen, and there she is again, Alfred Woodard. I got to meet Alfred Woodard a few short years after this film came out, and I actually said to her, I just love your work, Alfred, and it's just really wonderful to meet you. And that's all I said to her. And she said, it's nice to meet you too. Thank you. It's nice to see you. And that was the end of our conversation, and we went our separate ways. It was on I think West 4th Street. It was on Washington Square. It was on Washington Square Park. It was, I don't know what that street is, but it was on the NYU campus, literally a block or so away from NYU Law Library and the law school. It was just great to meet her. It was on a Sunday in the early afternoon, and she was by herself. It was so good to see her. She's absolutely wonderful. What a really wonderful human being she is. And a really good person and a great actor. Here she is talking to her colleague at work, I guess, or it's her friend. Maybe they don't work together, but it's a friend, perhaps. I don't know if they're work colleagues or just friends, or both. And Alfred Woodard and Mary Louise Parker there are talking. They're expressing these frustrations about being, the word they use is hysterical, and they kind of joke about it. But hysterical is a word that is got these sexist origins, or at least as it was used. It was used in science to label women as being crazy and irrational. That's what that word and the HYST part of that word, as in hysterectomy, as in, it's this base of that word that's used, and I guess it means out of woman, out of something, out of, and I don't know what the specific etymology is, but it is something that, male scientists used in a very sexist and derogatory way and a misogynistic way to attack women as being irrational somehow, or being crazy, or that kind of thing. It's not a word I like, actually. And now the surprise is revealed to Kevin Kline. And he can't believe it. Like, what are you doing here? Yeah, Kevin Kline asks, whose is it? and Mary Mcdonald says, she's so beautiful, isn't she? I mean, it's like this contrast. But I think it's a rational question. It's a completely rational question that Kevin Kline asks, which is, whose baby is this? How are you just bringing a child in here like this? And I do get that, because what makes this woman, this white woman, feel entitled to bring a child she has no idea whose it is? She doesn't go to child services and say, look, I found this child. She says, I'm going to just take this child as my own and take it home with me, which sounds to me to be awfully entitled and very, very white. I mean, it's really entitled, isn't it? Oh, I'm going to pick up this baby and bring it home with me. I get it, it's a movie, but still, it speaks to something else in my view. And as Kevin Kline says here, yeah, I guess you've not called the police. And I mean, he's an immigration lawyer, and he's asking the questions that a lawyer would ask, or someone who kind of is asking this out of a more, I guess, detached framework. But there is an air of entitlement in this scene that Mary Mcdonald is saying, oh, this baby wasn't kidnapped, and she may well be right. Claire is the name of the character for the sake of following this, so that I don't keep repeating Mary Mcdonald's name. So Mac and Claire are talking about this, and what Claire does, I think, really well here is refute this idea that she's lost her mind. Again, that whole misogynistic idea, hysterical, oh, a woman's crazy. And from Claire's point of view, she's not. She really thinks that there's not enough love in the world. And I want to be a difference maker. And I think, even though I criticize it as this entitlement, there is this aspect of she really wants to do something good. And genuinely, I know it fits into, again, this kind of white saviorship. But this child, which I think may be a Latina or a Latina baby, the right thing is being done here by Claire, and she brings the child to child services, and they take care of her, which was the right thing to do. I think Claire's a little bit disappointed that she did do the right thing. Don't you get that when you do the right thing, but yet you're somewhat disappointed? That's happened to every one of us, I think, where you've done something that perhaps you didn't want to do, that you knew was the right thing to do, and then you do the right thing, and you feel a little conflicted about it, and it's only later, until much later, when you think, yeah, I did the right thing. It might be a day later, it might be a few hours later, but then you go, yeah, I did the right thing. I know, I did. Even though at the time you did the right thing, at the very moment you did it, you weren't thinking it was the right thing at all. I've had a couple of those in my life. So we're now establishing Danny Glover's character there, Simon, and this is his sister, it turns out, in the film, Simon's sister and Simon's nephew. And they're establishing this, this rapport here, And you see there's this tension between the mother and son there. And there's the helicopter transition. And it comes again, and we now are firmly ensconced in this neighborhood. And you see look at the links in that screen door. Yeah, and they're a little rough housing that they do here. There's a bit of male bonding, I guess. Rough housing. It's all kind of, gentle. And this is what the young brother says here. It seems like every time a sucker comes at you, he's coming from the pocket. He's strapped. And again, that plays into the very real, serious problem of gun violence that we have in this country. And we do. We have this extreme problem of gun violence in the United States of America. It's been going on forever. And it's the gun culture that has permeated this culture and this society forever. It's been going on for hundreds of years. And this is part of what I think the young brother here is talking about too. People are coming from the pocket, they're strapped, and that's part of the issue. It's a culture, and it supersedes this notion of gangs, by the way, too. Gangs are part of it for sure, but the culture pre-existed gangs. It pre-existed Wyatt Earp, for that matter. Do you want to be gangbanging when you're 25? And this brother says something that's so powerful and sad. Shit, I'll never live to 25. It's really sad, but there's a lot of truth to that. Some of the young brothers in the neighborhoods where the kinds of violence happens, and this happens, it can happen in any neighborhood, but this kind of violence, it does take a lot of young brothers and sisters' lives. And if it's not brothers shooting each other or shooting young sisters, it is cops doing it. So we're double trapped, triple trapped in some of these neighborhoods, whether it's a neighborhood that you live in or don't live in. And if you don't have that going on, you've got to worry about some white person killing you. Just ask the parents of Trayvon Martin, or the parents of Jordan Davis, or the parents of, name the most recent black person to be killed by white men. There's a moment here where she is kind of framed in this kitchen, and then look what happens. Oh God, it's this sudden terror, isn't it? This gun violence that I've been talking about, and it's really horrifying. Oh boy, and her daughter just narrowly avoids being killed. It's a horrible thing, and the suddenness of it is so disturbing and so painful. Oh my God, my heart aches at this moment. It's a well-acted moment, but it is so painful. Oh my God. This is the system. This is a system of violence. That it's the violence of poverty. And this, we're at each other's throats, and the self-hatred and the indoctrination. It's so bad. It's so sad. Here's Mary Louise Parker smoking a joint. She is really feeling it here on her balcony. We've seen the helicopter transition. She's at home on her balcony. Maybe not smoking pot, but she's definitely smoking some cigarettes, Marlboro lights perhaps. She's got her work clothes on, and she's just kind of, letting her hair down here and in a very relaxed mode, and this obligatory shot of her revealing her underwear. Oh yeah, that's definitely a sexist shot there, Mr. Kasdan. And she's going to lie down here now, and her panties are exposed, and, she's a single woman, and, she's hugging this pillow. I don't know if she's wishing for it to be a man, or if she's just fantasizing, or whatever she's doing there. But that is her existence right now in her apartment, in her bedroom. And watch the transition in the editing by Carol Littleton. I love this. Oh, it's so good, isn't it? Look at that. We're now in someone else's home, would you believe? But this is Well, this transition here is just really great. I love that score from James Newton Howard. It's this kind of spiritual thing, I don't know. And here, you see the metallic triangle there? And it's going to be Steve Martin whom we see in his hospital bed. And the light shines on him. And I mean, I know a lot of it seems a little hokey perhaps, but I don't think so. I love this. I love these transitions, and James Newton Howard's score fits the bill perfectly. It's this realization that Davis has here, I guess, that, he might have to change his ways a little bit here. I have seen the light, he says. Muzzle tough. Yeah, it does take some really difficult events in life for people, I think, to see the light. But the question is, will they be able to keep the light on? Will that light stay on for them? Or will the age of understanding and consciousness dim and that light fade? Car culture. And here's Mary Louise Parker again. I just love it. Wash me asshole will work for food and all the things you can expect to see in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has this history, and there's another transition, a wipe transition to the ever-jogging Claire, who is getting her exercise routine in. This is something that's different, that we don't get to see. And she's run into a homeless man, and she can't stop looking at him. And again, there's this attempt to bring these different Los Angeles together in one fell swoop. And it's really, again, it's somewhat a fiction because you don't necessarily see these kinds of worlds colliding. I mean, of course, there are homeless persons in every city. And you will see this in Los Angeles as you do here in San Francisco, here in California, where there's a lot of homelessness. And it's a problem that's been going on for decades. But, usually people are in their cars, and the jogging you see in Los Angeles is in the neighborhood. You're not necessarily jogging miles and miles out to other neighborhoods because you simply can't. You've got to have a car to get around Los Angeles, and that's a truth that I think everybody knows. Certainly people who live in Los Angeles do. And although there is a metro system and there had been a subway system planned, that's been, like, I don't know where that is now, but it's been on and off again and all that. But people do get by on the metro, but the metro is just not the same as a car. Here's Jeremy Sisto reminiscing about his parents here, and he's getting older as an adolescent, and I think he's an instructor at this camp of these kids. And he's reminiscing about what it was like to be the kid's age that he's talking to. And there's this growth, I guess, that he has. And he's talking to this child and saying, hey, don't worry, kid, it's going to be all right. I'm looking after you. You're going to understand that this happens. It's about getting older and growth. And you're going to realize, kid, that this is something that you will learn from. Oh, we're going to see a little gruesome accident here. So if you're squeamish, you might want to look away here in the next few minutes. Unless you've seen Grand Canyon before, then you know what's coming next. Or at least in the next few moments. they're having this kind of mini argument here, Claire and Mac. And watch him chop this tomato. And you'll see what happens here. And I think you know what's coming, even if you haven't seen the movie. I find this scene difficult to watch only because of what happens. And I'm someone who actually has a very strong tolerance to blood and all of that. But, ooh, dear, I don't know. For some reason, I don't know. And it's not really a really gory scene, but it's, ooh, tomato and blood. And it looks like ketchup, but it's actually his blood. Oh, now it looks strawberry red. It's kind of not cool. And this is so interesting because this is a confluence of things that happens here too, because he's just cut his finger in the middle of this mini conversation or mini argument, and oh gosh, I mean that just you're gonna see what's gonna happen here. It's this confluence of things that happens. So he's this bloody finger, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, the earthquake. Oh man, yeah, it kind of seems a little bit too much to be true, right? It's too good to be true that he would cut his finger, then there'd be an earthquake. I mean, yeah, I think that does stretch the limits of credulity, but the point is, it's not that it's unrealistic, it's that this is what happens in Los Angeles. You could be having an argument one minute and a quake the next. And the active faults down in Los Angeles really are active. And there are some active faults up here in San Francisco as well. We up here had a huge earthquake back in 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake. Oh my God, that was something. 6.9 on the Richter scale. A lot of people died in San Francisco and in Oakland. A lot of them were elderly, and we're seeing an elderly man on the floor here, and look, blood, and looks like he's had a heart attack, and you've got Mac trying to help him. And all that blood is actually Kevin Kline's character, Mac's blood. And this frantic search to get the police or the fire, the paramedics, to come in, and they have finally got there. And off the older man goes. And I love this transition. Again, editing here by Carol Littleton. Watch this. There's something haunting about that transition. And the helicopter that you see again. Kind of something spooky about that spotlight too. There's something different about this transition. It looks a little bit too clear, too vivid. And we know we have crossed into some kind of dream world because we've got Kevin Kline's character, Mac, flying through nighttime Los Angeles, flying through the air like Superman. And yeah, this is some kind of dream. I think Lawrence Kasdan really does play about with this notion of Los Angeles and with heroism, with fear, with fearlessness, and we're seeing that here, the fearlessness, this kind of ego tripping as well that I guess this particular white man has. This is a guy who's cheating on his spouse. He was almost mugged, and this is about the losing control too, and this sense of stability that may not be there. He's just flown over Mann's Chinese Theater and now over Capitol Records. Those are really big time landmarks in Los Angeles. Grumman's Chinese Theater is a big deal in Los Angeles, as is Capitol Records building. Hollow Mac instead of Hollywood. So you've got Danny Glover here on top of the Hollywood sign, or the Hollow Mac sign, and boom, there's that kind of high five. And then look at this apartment building stuck in the middle of nowhere. You know it's all a dream. It's all really crude too. And it's about longing. This is about his longing. He's definitely having an affair, is Mac, with the character played by Mary Louise Parker. Forgive me her name. I don't remember her character's name. And this is all male fantasy. And, you know, Lawrence Kasdan perhaps projecting something of his own fantasy, showing us Mary Louise Parker topless here, baring her breasts. And we see that Kevin Kline really wants that woman that he's been having the affair with. And boom, now we go back to what the real life is. And it's this transition again. Mary Mcdonald, aka Claire, and now we see her dream, her imagining, and she's got this dream going, and then she wakes up from it and there's no Mac next to her, which is strange because it still looks like it's nighttime and she's wandering through here. And look at this. This is just really wild. There's some haunting moments in this film that I think jar us out of any notion of the fantastical. It's a film within a film in that way. It provides us these devices for escape because Grand Canyon as a movie is quite, I think for its time, a somewhat heavy movie. I know that sounds perhaps a little pretentious to say perhaps, but there is something about it that is heavy. It's asking us to look at what America is in 1991 amidst things going on the outside in reality. And these characters are trying to process some of that. And you know that this is a dream that Claire's having now. She's running with her nightie on in the middle of the day to the Amtrak station, although maybe there are people in Los Angeles who do things like that. And she's trying to get the attention of somebody, and then they're kind of ignoring her. Oh, it's her son, who just kind of waves at her strangely. And it's Mac. Oh, that's so creepy. With his bloody finger. And again, this feeling of isolation and abandonment. But it plays to me about as this neediness that somehow Claire needs this man, these two men. And it's, again, I find that to be really sexist in a way. This idea that Claire needs these two men, and then there's the baby there. And it's kind of a very reductionist way of painting this existence, this existential context around Claire, that she somehow needs to live through this child, as if there's nothing else in the world for her to live for but this child and these two men. And yet, you know, that's such a dishonest thing, I have to say. As much as I love this movie, I think that's one of my criticisms of it. It's this very sexist gloss and this very limiting gloss of the Claire character. And now, boom, it's clearly a dream. The homeless man has come in, and boom. And she wakes up, and there is Mac next to her. I think the sequence is very well edited because the transitions are really clever. But I think it reveals something about the way I think Lawrence Kasdan might feel about the Claire character. And I don't know that her character is as fully realized as it could be. I'll put it that way. The screenplay, by the way, was written by Lawrence Kasdan and Meg Kasdan, which I find interesting. Both of them wrote the script, but yet I don't know. Again, I still think that the characterization of Claire in some of these scenes, I don't know that I would go along with it. I think there's something problematic about it in some way, I don't know. I just think that there's more to Claire than the way she's represented here, and it's somewhat limiting. Meg Kasdan, by the way, is the spouse. Lawrence Kasdan is Meg Kasdan's husband, which I find interesting, husband and wife team. And I don't know if this is some kind of semi-autobiographical thing for them, but I do think that it's very interesting the way that Claire has been sketched here. And here's Davis coming out of hospital, and he's bribing the nurse, or he's giving the nurse some money as he hugs her, because she refuses it, but then he finds a way to slip some money into her pocket. I think that this is the woman here, the red-headed lady here, is well, Steve Martin's character, Davis, is her boyfriend. The philosophizing again. This film is about midlife crisis as well. And how these characters, these predominantly white characters, are reevaluating their lives through their own children and through their aging. We all hopefully do that, whether we have kids or whether we don't, that as we get older, we do have these assessments of our lives, and we have these, what I call second memories. I've just made that up, where you're looking back at your life as you lived it when you were living it, say 20 years ago, at a certain younger age, and then you look back at that through the prism of now, at this age that you are currently at, and you think about it differently because you've got the benefit of that experience, and you look at that life perhaps differently that you lived, say, 20 years ago than you did when you were living it back then, if you understand what I'm saying here. Davis is really on point here about the handkerchief. Yeah, you wipe it and you blow your nose in it, and then you hand it to them when someone needs some tissue to wipe their face in or their eyes in, and it's true. There's something true about that. I really don't like the way that the women are presented here. It's that they all want children, and I'm sorry, that is it's not true. Not every woman wants a child. I know that Davis's girlfriend here is saying, "Oh, I want children," and I'm not mocking that. I'm not. But I think that come on, two women in the movie, both of them long for children. Claire finds this child and she can't let go of it, and now the woman you're seeing here, now she wants children. And every woman wants a child? No, I think not. There are lots of women in the world who do not want children. Yet in this movie, the two women that we see, at least two of them, do want children. It's certainly not a bad thing that anyone would want a child. I just think it's kind of, in this movie, two women both are yearning for children, and then a third woman in a neighborhood has a really uncomfortable relationship or a tense relationship with one of her two children. I don't know. I just don't. I don't know. Oh, the bloodstains won't come out so easily on that sidewalk. Look at that. That's where that shooting happened. Somebody got killed. I mean, that's what that says to me in that shootout, that shooting that we saw. It's horrible, isn't it? It's horrible. And there's so many communities all over the country like this, whether they are in black, brown, or white neighborhoods. Oh, the palm trees there. I love those. And we see the tow truck coming here. And Danny Glover, playing Simon, the tow truck driver. And there's Mac. And they're going to have a little bit of a conversation here. You can see the sun setting in this part of Los Angeles. I think they are, it's probably around maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. And this is the first time that they're seeing each other again. You see Danny Glover's character, Simon, in the New York Mets hat. Danny Glover is such an excellent actor. I met Danny Glover in 2020, just when this pandemic was just about to hit the United States. In earnest, was literally maybe about a week after the time I met Danny Glover. And he, when I met him, was such a nice guy. Oh, he is a nice guy. He was a nice guy when I met him, and just really lovely man. A really good person, an activist, actor. He has worked forever on the big screen and advocated for so many important causes. Is an activist on the front lines. Danny Glover is a really good person, a stand-up guy, and really believes in the causes he activates for, represents, and really, I think he's known really as an activist first. The acting is secondary for him, I think. I think the activism means more to him, but in any event, Danny Glover is an outstanding actor. What a great resume he has. We're having this scene here now as a recollection. You see the faded color. This is a moment of near death for Mac, and somebody grabs him here, and he's literally going to be a dead duck if he is not pulled back. And that choice that someone made to save his life, and that looks like Frances McDormand from Another Year and Another Age, the actor Frances McDormand, who has won the Academy Award more than once. It looks just a little bit like her at a younger age. I love the way that Mac tries to make sense of what that near-death experience was for him and what it meant to him. And I do things like this, I not necessarily with near-death experiences, but with things that happen in life, and that everything that happens, in my view, is not an accident. I don't believe in things just accidentally happening. Now, accidents happen. But when there are events in life, I am not so sure that they are accidents. I think that they are all designed in a certain way. I'm not saying foretold. I'm saying that they are designed by design and not coincidence. Just some of the things I noticed that happen and that get you to thinking about things. I love the way this scene plays out, the way that Kasdan directs it. And you just have this two-shot here, and the camera slowly dollying around it. The two of the actors there just talking and philosophizing too. I like that. It's just a good banter between two men. And you don't see that a lot in American film, where two men are just talking without having to be flexing muscles or threatening the other person. They are having an intellectual or philosophical exchange that I think is really good. You don't see that a lot, particularly in American film, especially in Hollywood films. "81 years old, that's a long time for a black man to live in this town." And I think that's true. Any black person that gets to 81, particularly any black man that does, is doing something right and has managed to, despite all the adversity, has managed to avoid being killed by a cop, and has managed to avoid a lot of different things, and has also kept themselves in very good health. Life expectancy for black men, for black males in America, is not great. I love the way this shot ends up there. It's really good directing. I just think that this casual banter is really good. It gives us something different to look at and think about. And there's only so many ways you can film conversation between two people. If you've got pages of screenplay, you've got to find a way to block and set that up, and how you're going to apply your filmmaking style to it all. And you've got to find a way to make it work. You've got to compress time. You've got to look at editing. You've got to look at staging. You've got to look at the blocking of the scenes. You've got to look at the pacing of the dialogue and the rhythm and the timing. And you have the script supervisor to help you with that. And you have the actors. I don't know how many times this scene was filmed, but it just seems like a very natural conversation between two very good actors. I think Kevin Kline's done some good work in his career too. And they are just playing off of each other there, and they both go to their cars. And I like this scene here. Mucking around with other people's lives. Yeah, that is something that happens in America, doesn't it? And sometimes, a lot of times, most times it doesn't, but it does happen sometimes. And this is about connectivity and benevolence, and this self-referencing here by Mac, the white guy, the white savior. "You white? Yeah, how about it, That's pretty white. Yeah, Canoga Park is, as far as I know, still pretty white, even now. Yeah, it is. Just like Simi Valley is, I think. And that whole dialogue there is good. It's about this wanting to do good and not seeming to be overbearing or paternalistic, the white guy. And that's kind of, again, it's the editorial statement, I think, being made by Lawrence Kasdan as a white male director too, because Hollywood is an industry built on white male saviorship. There's no question about it. If you look at Hollywood films, there's always some white guy trying to save the world and trying to make everybody's life better, and he's this paternalistic figure, and that's what that scene was about. And it was about turning that kind of thing on its head. And with Kevin Kline kind of, Mac breaking the fourth wall there, the white guy, because, that's essentially what I think Grand Canyon does with the Kevin Kline character to a degree, is to make him this paternalistic figure, but not do so without having some kind of self-referencing, and also to give you the impression that he too has had his life touched by Danny Glover's character Simon, which he actually has. There's no question about that. He's had his life saved by Simon, the Danny Glover character. now there's this epiphany that's, that Davis has here. Steve Martin, who in a very good performance, is talking about, oh, no, I can't make that kind of schlocky, violent ass, B-movie-ish, violent, exploitation movie anymore. I've got to do something different. Now that he's walking around with a limp, as he says, he's now going to see the light here. And, it's just interesting how things happen. And there's Claire is a psychologist, and you just kind of see that. Even though Davis is a friend, of the family, if you will, still, here's Claire in a professional capacity, trying to diagnose him and at least listen to him. This film is about life, and you just hear Davis talking about that here, the instinct to live, the survival guide. And he's talking about finance and talking about that in Los Angeles in 1991. There is some idealism here. I want to make the world a better place. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we all, to an extent, would like the world to be a better place. But that means we've got to challenge ourselves. We can't just say that we want to make the world a better place. We've got to actually do it. And it starts with ourselves. It starts with making changes in our own lives, in our own behavior, so that we can be better stewards of trying to make this world a better place. Because you can't really, as I do say, make the world a better place without first trying to better yourself and make yourself better with, everyday things that you do that you want to change and make better in that instance. This is really interesting because the tables are being turned on the psychologist, right? Now Davis is turning the tables on Claire, and he's talking about Claire's son Roberto, played by Jeremy Sisto, and it's really something that's very interesting because now she's revealing her own soul to Davis, which I think is very interesting because she's the psychologist and she's the one who is now spilling her crises to the patient, which I don't think is really done in psychology. That's not ethical, I don't think. Kind of like the same thing as where you've got therapists who have sex with their patients, which I don't think is a good idea. I just don't think that works very well, to say the least. Okay, this is, again, Simon's sister. And they're talking there briefly, and now you see Kevin Kline, and you see, you do see Mary Louise Parker there, and Alfred Woodard, who plays Jane. This is a good scene. How adults are unmoored. They are not rooted to something. And so this is Mac trying to explain where he's coming from. He's kind of not really got his feet on the ground at the moment. And then he's going to tell the story. And you've got Mary Louise Parker, who, he's cheating with. And then you've got Alfred Woodard as Jane, who she's really liking what Mac is selling here. And what Mac is selling is an opportunity for Jane to date someone that he, has had his life saved by. Mac has had his life saved by Simon, and so the favor that's being returned by Mac is to set up Jane, who he's just literally just met right there, on a date with Mac, who really he's kind of literally just met also. All of these people are not people that he's known for very long. And so, look, he's actually proposing that now. Yeah, this is kind of, would you like to play Hollywood Squares? Would you like to meet this guy, Simon? I don't know that much about him, this very handsome black guy that he mentions. How are you going to describe Jane? The same way, a very handsome black guy. And then Kevin Kline goes, yeah. Well, the thing is, again, that scene wouldn't be in a movie now because there was still a lot of homophobia running rampant in Hollywood film and in American society and elsewhere in 1991. And I think in popular culture that has dissipated significantly, even though there certainly are people still in politics and in entertainment and elsewhere who do reveal themselves as grade A homophobic people, really fearful of gay people, of trans people. And there's still violence against people who are gay, against people who are trans. And there's violence against all kinds of groups of people. Asians, black people, native people. I mean, we still have violence in our society and we need to get rid of it. And what this guy is doing is selling life insurance. Can you believe this? Look at that. He's selling life insurance to the sister of Danny Glover's character, Simon. What an evil thing. And this is what happens in black communities. You get people trying to blood suck off the community. Life insurance for her kids. Oh boy, that's so crude. But it's the system talking too. They send a black man over there to do this bidding as if it's him. But in reality, it's this white system that he's caping for. And here's Mary Mcdonald, Claire, jogging, and she's going to jog and go back to this spot with somewhat a measure of trepidation. Okay, here's this moment again, this transition flash. She's got these voices she's hearing, and boom, that bright light. And James Newton Howard's score, oh. And then boom, Canoga Park. And here's Danny Glover and Kevin Kline. Their chemistry is very good. You notice their chemistry, and it's very easy and untroubled for two people who, in the characters they play, have really very little working knowledge of each other. They look really comfortable as actors playing them. True pros, both of them, by the way. True professionals. How about that? You don't see that very often. That's a moment that seems like it's a cutting room floor moment, but may not be. Here's the bus, and that song you may be hearing now is Warren Zevon's Searching for a Heart. Really great song. He had another song in this movie that you may have heard earlier, but I talked all over it. And it's called Lawyers, Guns, and Money, one of his most famous hits. Warren Zevon, who's no longer with us, just tremendous singer and songwriter, and really good in the 1970s in particular. And Lawyers, Guns, and Money is one of my favorites of his. look at those big sunglasses. The 1980s and 90s, the era of big sunglasses, and the 70s too. I love this part here, you know, the two happy parents who are in on something that Claire is not in on, because Roberto has not told his mother Claire about the fact that, oh yeah, you know, Roberto's going to San Diego. We're so happy that you're deciding to let that happen. And of course, she was not told anything. And she kind of smiles, though, that's what's going on here. And it's a time for transition. And this movie is full of transitions for filmmaking device purposes. But it's also about the transitions in these characters, too, you know. How life rolls on and rumbles on, and there are some constants like the Grand Canyon itself, which is a character too in this film, obviously. But this constant of those rocks, you know, those structures, while people's lives change and they get shaped and they grow older and they hopefully get wiser and they reminisce and they feel more vulnerable as they get older, but they also feel more fearless as they get older. There's this fearlessness as you age, that you get older and you feel like you can say and do anything, you know. They were relieved I wasn't Puerto Rican. Oh man, such is the life, isn't it? That you have the racist parents, the racist white parents that you get introduced to, and you only hope that they aren't racist, but they really are, and they're stifling their racism and their racist attitudes for the 5 minutes that you get to say hello to them, and then as soon as you're gone, they're back to their racist rhetoric and all the other stuff. This is the first of two sequences, one of which has Claire driving Roberto. The other one is going to be later on where Mac is driving Roberto, or rather Roberto will be driving Mac in a driving lesson because he's learning to drive. But this is really interesting, the way that the two parents have a perspective on whether or not there's going to be a split between them, and the way that question is asked of Claire. I think this scene is about the idea of what it is like to a child when there's this fighting going on, or at least how that child views that. What adults do in the presence of children or around children, and how that impacts them. And sometimes the clearest-eyed assessment of everything is comes from a child, not from the two of you as parents. And you think that you have it licked because you've got more experience than your child. And then you get proved wrong when the child comes up with this really profound thing that you never thought of. And that happens for families. And so I think that scene that you just saw was a case of that, where Roberto, played by Jeremy Sisto, comes up with this thing, and Claire's going, wait a minute, really? What makes you think that? And it kind of gives her a moment to think again. Oh, these two look like a couple, don't they? Alfred Woodard and Danny Glover. Woo! Love is in the air. Everywhere I look around. Love is in the air. Every sight and every sound. I'm not going to sing the whole thing. That is Tom Paul Jones, by the way. Love is in the air, from the 1970s. Great tune. I love this scene between the two of them, Alfred Woodard and Danny Glover. I think it's the only scene, really, that they have together. Together alone. I mean, there's another one or two, I think. But this one, this dialogue here, is one of the major ones they have, and one of the only ones. There's another one coming, but this one I love. And they're just talking about how they got set up. I mean, both of them, they don't really know each other yet. But yet there's a chemistry, there's a promise there between them. Mac must have had some reason to think this would work. And then Jane asks Simon, do you know, you've known him for a while, right? No. No, not at all, really. Not long at all. And Jane doesn't know him either. It's just kind of funny. Maybe we're the only two black people he ever met. There's a truth about that. You know, there are lots of studies and lots of reports about a lot of white people who, you know, their circle of friends is, you know, at least 80% white, if not more. And something happened to me with this years ago. I was at a wedding, someone's wedding, and I was one of only two black people there. And this white woman who got married to someone introduced me to someone else in there, the only other person who was black. And the white woman who introduced me, who got married, said, Omar, I want you to meet, and I forget her name, so-and-so, whatever her name was. And she's from Brooklyn, New York, and I know you used to live in New York, and yeah, and I want to introduce you to another New Yorker. And this is here in California that this happened. And I'm like, why is she introducing me to, I've got nothing against being introduced to a black woman, that's great. But I'm saying to myself, why is this white woman introducing me to the only other black person at this wedding? That is so white, and it's kind of like so racist too, right? It's like, why couldn't you introduce me to anybody who is white, or anyone, white, Latino, Asian, or black even? But it was just the way that she did it. I want to introduce you to someone from New York. It's like, oh yeah, right. And there's probably other New Yorkers there too, right? But it was this particular person who's a black woman, and as a white woman, you're making this statement. It's like, oh, come on now. So that scene that just went by with Alfred Woodard and Danny Glover talking about maybe we're the only two black people he's ever met. That's kind of like the way I feel about that episode that happened years ago to me here in California. You know, this white woman introducing me to this black woman, you know, nice person. And the only other person there that was black was her. And it's like, she and I, the only two blacks, like, okay, we see what's going on here. It's like, oh, but yeah, you're from New York and she's from New York. You know, you used to live in New York, Omar, and yeah, okay. And by the way, after we were introduced, neither of us, the woman nor myself, the black woman nor myself, spoke to each other again. We just went off in our separate ways and did not talk again. And it's like, because I think we both knew, I think she knew too, instinctually what was going on here, what was going on with that. I tell you, man, some of the things that some white people do, woo, let me tell you, to me as a black person, I'm telling you, it kind of, and I think a lot of black people can relate to this and kind of shake their heads, quite frankly, at some of the stuff that goes on. It's just pretty damn, well, it speaks volumes, and it ain't necessarily positive, shall I say. And here's the second scene of dialogue between Alfred Woodard and Danny Glover, just the two of them. And it's really nice to have that moment because they need, I think, that time to breathe. You know, we've had a lot of scenes with Mac and Claire and all of that. And it's good to have these moments with these two characters and these two actors who are really great, great actors. I know that barking dog may not agree with me, though. Definitely doesn't agree with me. And I don't think that dog has watched Grand Canyon either. I just love this scene. This is the feeling I'd like to have at work. This is beautiful. I just think that it's authentic dialogue, and it's really Alfred Woodard's character, Jane, speaking her passion, her feelings, and Danny Glover as Simon doing the same. I love this. Ooh, that is really hot. That's the way she says bye, Simon, and then the way she looks, her eyes, the expression. Oh God, there's and Simon agrees with me. Danny Glover agrees. It's just car culture again here, and we go from one car culture moment to another. Mary Louise Parker's character here, and the randomness of the violence in Los Angeles is coming really soon to a car near you. Boom. That happens, right? And boom, there's a police car immediately. This is also another thing about 1991 Los Angeles. The LAPD there coming in immediately. But you know what about 1991 LA? Daryl Gates, the police chief of Los Angeles Police Department, and a real piece of garbage. Daryl Gates was racist, horrible human being, and I'm glad he's no longer around. Believe me. And you got this LAPD cop. He looks like he may be a rookie or someone who's not been on the force very long, and they're clearly anxious. Mary Louise Parker, and she's just been traumatized, obviously, as you can understand, by this white criminal who has smashed her window and ran away at top speed, and he's probably going to be caught. So she's kind of being let out of the car for some air, and I don't know what's going on here, but I think you'll find out pretty soon. I think I know what is going on here. This is interesting that she would confide in a male police officer that she had this really a one-night stand with Mac, and asking his opinion about it. I don't know is that something that the average woman would do? If you're a woman listening to this commentary and watching Grand Canyon as well as you listen to me commenting on it, do you think the average woman, no matter what her background is, would tell a police officer, a male police officer, in passing that she has been having an affair with a man, a one-night stand, or it wasn't an affair, it's a one-night stand? I don't think that would ever happen. That I know this is just a movie. And there's that suggestion at the end of that scene that maybe, just maybe, Mary Louise Parker is available for this police officer, this male police officer she's confiding in. Which again, it sets up this idea of women as easy prey or easy and available. Again, it's a really destructive and misogynistic trope that gets put in movies. And it's incredible. And the movies in the 90s were getting better, but they were still so very misogynistic. And, there's still a lot of that now still, but in the 80s and 90s it was really bad. In the 70s it was all horrible, and believe it or not, in the earlier years misogyny in film was not nearly as bad in terms of the fact that you had more female screenwriters. But yeah, there were still very misogynistic films, don't get me wrong, very paternalistic, very much a woman being in the kitchen in a lot of these movies, which was horrible. There's this feeling of being trapped, and each of these characters is going through it. We just saw Mary Louise Parker being trapped in this conundrum and in her car, and in this conundrum of dealing with the fallout from a one night stand that did not go anywhere else, with her boss, obviously, Mac. And now there's this trapping of this young brother who's new in the neighborhood, and now some guy, really strange guy in a way, is kind of rolling up on him like this. And he's friendly, but I think about a little overly friendly. And at night, this is not something that anyone really wants. And naturally, the brother's radar is up as a young black man at night. It doesn't look good, and so he senses danger, and having had the house he lives in shut up, he is out of there. And they're all kind of making light of him, and maybe they didn't want trouble, I don't know. But this brother is not going to wait around to find out, and boom, so he runs off, and I think it's a good move to make. He has every right to do that. As a young brother, he does not feel safe. He feels targeted and hunted, because he is targeted and hunted down as if he's somehow not a human being. And that's what American culture has spent over 100 years trying to tell white people and anybody else who will listen or dare listen, is somehow that we as black people somehow aren't human. And that's the thing that's been perpetuated in movies and on TV and in cartoons and in magazines and movies and everything else. He's really running, and now you've got a police car because, the racist LAPD, they think a black man running is somehow problematic. And there's just no reason for that. If that's a white person running, those cops just drive past them. I'm telling you. We all know that. So you got this again, it's shades of Rodney King and shades of so many other violent police who threaten or just outright kill black men and women and boys and girls. Don't you know what stop means? I mean, it's just this completely unnecessary to be pointing a gun at the guy. He is not posing any kind of threat or danger at all. And this is what policing is in America. It doesn't have to be like this, though. But all this militarization of police, and it began in the 90s during the time when this movie came out. And all of this confrontational policing and a profound lack of de-escalation makes this whole situation really abysmal. And the police is an occupying force, not as people who help. I remember the days when the police would be on the beat. They'd be walking the street and they would be saying hello and making contact with people in a neighborhood and doing it in a really friendly way. Now, and especially in black neighborhoods, it's, we're suspecting of you. We suspect you. And that's automatic, and it's racist. It's got to end. So now, Mary Louise Parker's done with it all. She's quitting. And obviously this is sexual harassment. I don't think the movie makes that clear enough. Not this particular scene. This scene is not sexual harassment, but their interaction, her saying that, we had this one night stand and that kind of thing is sexual harassment, even if she and he have consented. It's because sexual harassment is based on power, not on whether people consent or not. And that's the key, and that's the law too, is there's hostile workplace harassment, and then there's, of course, quid pro quo harassment, this for that harassment. If you sleep with me, then I will get you this promotion. That kind of thing is quid pro quo, this for that. It's literally the Latin translation. But power is the thing that undergirds these kinds of situations. And because there is an unequal power between the Mary Louise Parker character as a secretary or as an assistant and Kevin Kline's character as an immigration lawyer whom she works for, anything that they do on site or even off it is sexual harassment. And the only time that it ceases to be sexual harassment, even if they're consenting to it, is when one of them quits the job. I mean, seriously, they could be on vacation together. And if they go on vacation together as consenting adults, if they still are working at the same workplace and they have sex while they are on the other side of the world, say in Sydney, Australia, or whether they are in the Bahamas or whether they're on the African continent somewhere, if they have sex, that's still sexual harassment, because again, there's this unequal power. And there could be undue coercion. If something goes wrong, the fallout is such that he has the power to make her life very miserable. And he, being Simon, has the power to make Mary Louise Parker's life very miserable. So that's where the harassment is. Very interesting, but it's true. And the only way it ends is if one of them quits their job at that company. Well, obviously, Mary Louise Parker's character beat Kevin Kline's character to it. Not that Kevin Kline was ever going to give up his job as an immigration lawyer at the firm he works at. That was a nice scene that you just saw there. A brief one there between the daughter and the mother. I thought that was very nice. Mac's sister along with Mac's sister's daughter. Do you always talk this fast? This is really lovely stuff from the daughter of Simon. And it's really nice that Jane is there as well. Alfred Woodard, Jane is there watching this. I love this. Is there love going on out there? I think that's really beautiful. And then you just see them looking at each other. Watch them look at each other. Oh, that's great. This is really interesting. Mary Louise Parker again here talking to, I think this is Mary Ellen Traynor. She was in a number of films in the 80s and 90s, including the Lethal Weapon films. She played I think a psychologist in those films, police psychologist. He's just giving me the most glorious recommendation. Why on earth did you decide to leave him? And I love the way that the camera focuses there on Mary Louise Parker's reactions. She's kind of sheepish looking, but there's a lot of very interesting subtext that we already know what's going on there. He just gave you the most glowing recommendation. Why would you leave? And I'm surprised that she, the woman asking that, Mary Ellen Traynor's character, and I believe that is Mary Ellen Traynor who played her. I can't believe that she doesn't put two and two together. Which I think in real life she would have done. And this is what's happened. See, here's the nephew of Simon. And he's just telling Simon, yeah, I've seen some real bad shit, dude. I've seen some really bad stuff. The blood there on the front of his sweatshirt tells the tale, tells the story. And I like this scene, even though it's heartbreaking. There's the emotion and the bonding and the feeling, vulnerability of black men and black boys. And you don't see that very often, even in a film like this, a Hollywood film, and it's nice that Lawrence Kasdan did it. It's a little bit too brief for my taste, but Carol Middleton gives us just enough that we get to see that glimpse. We saw the helicopter a moment ago, and look again at the traffic. And here's the second scene that I told you about. The first one I told you about earlier was Mary Mcdonald, Claire, driving around Roberto, played by Jeremy Sisto, and now it's Jeremy Sisto driving around Kevin Kline. And Kevin Kline is the one giving the lesson here, the driving lesson here. And giving driving lessons in Los Angeles on the freeway or in the streets, ooh, I don't know. It's not necessarily the best idea, I don't think. But you got to start somewhere, especially if you're driving in Los Angeles. Where else are you going to take that lesson? You've got to get it done, and the way to learn is to just do it, in the most adverse traffic situations. And you always will have an idiot pulling out of his car, getting up out of his car and flinging the door open in the middle of the road as you're driving. People do all kinds of weird shit on the road. You know that. As Max says, people are such assholes. And he's kind of not far off from the truth there. There are good people in the world, though. And here now Roberto's doing this analysis again about the state of the relationship between his mother and father. Oh, and the baby, and why does she want this whole thing about this baby? And he's getting the perspective now from Mac, who is telling him about all of these things that are considerations about the child, and a child that clearly Claire wants, that Mac really doesn't want anything to do with. And now, Roberto's taking all this in while he's trying to learn how to drive. So there's all of this conversation about some really important life things, and all while trying to drive. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. There is a real privilege to some of these characters, the white characters in particular. But I also think that they are aware or conscious of some of that privilege. I do think Kevin Kline's character, Mac, is aware of it. And he is always constantly self-reflecting and introspective, which I think is healthy. I don't think it damages the movie at all. I just wish that some of the other characters, Danny Glover's character is, and so are a couple of others, but I wish that there was more of that going on all the time, although there is. I'm probably contradicting myself here, because all of the characters do spend time reflecting and reminiscing and ruminating about their lives and about life in general. And I think that's really healthy. For a film like this, I think it works really well. It seems as if this moment takes an age, as Mac is trying to teach Roberto how to drive and when to make this turn and all of this. And here we go, trouble. There you go. The road rage thing was just the thing back then. It was just starting. You see the motorist a few moments ago cursing out Kevin Kline, but now road rage is all over the place. Some people get killed. It's just insane. He made it, but only barely. He just managed. It was such an ordeal, just to make that left turn in Los Angeles. There's San Francisco, there's really very few places to make left turns. Certainly on some of the biggest streets in the city of San Francisco, which kind of must be a metaphor for something too, not being able to make left turns on most of the biggest streets in the city of San Francisco. Something very interesting. And here, making the left turn in LA is one of the hardest things you'll learn in life. And that's kind of true. That is, there's some truth to that. This town stinks. It's just interesting that that line drops in there too from Kevin Kline. Yeah, there's things about Los Angeles that aren't great for sure, but everybody's there for the work. You know, everybody in LA comes there. Most people, especially in Hollywood, they're there to work. People don't go to Los Angeles to say, oh, I love LA in that way. I mean, there's great things to do in LA, don't get me wrong. The John Paul Getty Museum is just superb, and there's so many really good things to see and do in Los Angeles. But culturally, I don't think that Los Angeles has a culture. Now, I know some people won't like to hear that, especially Los Angelinos. There is culture in LA, but I think what I'm trying to say is there's not a cultural identity there that I think there should or could be. When you think of LA, you think of three things: the freeway, the Hollywood sign, and the sun, and maybe Rodeo Drive. But you don't think of anything deeply cultural. At least I don't. Maybe John Paul Getty Museum? I don't know, the Getty Museum? But I don't think of anything cultural in LA. I really don't. And someone's got to correct me if I'm wrong about that. I may well be wrong, but I just don't see it. I really don't see what I can think about cities like Philadelphia, the cheesesteak, and you've got the grit of the people in Philadelphia. Same thing in New York. The wise ass, the smart Alex in New York, the people who are resilient and tough, just like they are in Philly. And in Boston, the same kind of hard scrabble attitude to life, and it's Chicago. There's certain cities that have this motif about the people, but in Los Angeles, what is it? Fake boobs? Plastic surgery? Six packs? What is it? I love this scene. This is one of the best scenes in the film, actually. Just the two of them lying there with all of the things that have gone on in the movie between them and the thoughts they have. Just a tender moment to kind of relax and look at each other and kiss and maybe go further than kissing and end up having sex, which I think is what this is leading to. We won't see much more here than we are seeing at the moment. But they're clearly going to have sex there, and good for them. Congratulations, mazel tov. Marital sex seems like a contradiction in terms, for some people at least. There's such cynicism about that, about people who are married and whether they have a lot of sex or whether they have very little, and as compared to people who are single. And there's the notion that you would think that because a person is single, they would suddenly have more sex. But that's, that gets blown out the water, because if you're in a situation of marriage or if you have a partner, the opportunity for you to have sex is there whenever you both want that. And note I said whenever you both want that. I love this scene too. These outro scenes, I call these outros, these conversations that kind of come at the end or toward the end of the movie. And it's kind of like this exit mode, the exit speeches that these characters make to each other. And they're on the studio lot in Los Angeles. That's an actual lot. That's not one built. It's really the lot on whichever studio lot it is. And this is 1991, and look at this little cart that they're driving around. I don't know if they still do that now. Do they still have the carts? I don't know. Maybe not. So this is Davis and Mac, and all of these sets that have been closed off, or it's just interesting. And you've got a woman who's walking, who you're going to see again more closely, and watch this, Oh yeah, stop by, I have something for you. Yeah, right, something for you. Yeah, I wonder what. And of course she's got, her nipples are sticking through her sweater, and yeah, I've got something for you, stop by. Yeah, I wonder what that is. There's a sign for Home Alone there, the movie Home Alone with Macaulay Culkin from 1990. So this movie was shot in 1990. At least parts of it were. And again, this is a set. This is a real set. This is an actual set on an actual lot in Hollywood, in Los Angeles. Yeah, I love how Davis philosophizes here, and he considers himself lucky for the rest of his life because he gets to limp. And some people don't get to limp. They are 6 feet under, sadly. You know. Says you, Mr. Snob, Mr. Arbiter of Taste, Mr. Immigration Lawyer to the Arts. There's a poetry to that line, because there is a certain amount of snobbery that goes on in Grand Canyon. And I just love the fact that there's a great deal of self-awareness about it, and that the film does point it out. Whereas if you looked at The Big Chill, which was done, as I said, in 1983, just 8 years before that. It's unbelievable. That was only 8 years before. There's snobbery in there too, but there's a lot of real raw dialogue in that this film doesn't have. The dialogue here is much more polished, I think. It can be raw on occasion, but The Big Chill was really raw and just such a great film. And this is a great film too, in a very different way. I love this too, this part here. All of life's riddles are answered in the movies. I think it's one of the best lines in the film is the one that Davis speaks there. And I think Davis is supposed to be Joel Silver, the Hollywood producer that loves the violent movie and produces a lot of films, produced a lot of films, including the Matrix films. I don't know if he gets to produce anymore. I don't know if he's even around anymore. I love the outro here as the limping Davis walks in to Studio Lot 20 and the door opens and slides back. And it's his goodbye, his swan song. I love it. I love this. Lawrence Kasdan's a pretty damn good filmmaker. And he's a good writer too. I think some of his screenplays are pretty good. I had a few problems here with, again, the way that women are depicted in this kind of look at women in 1991 as somehow needy for children, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that was his writing or Meg Kasdan's, but either way, I don't think it comes across well. That's my only criticism of this film, really. And there's that, but I do think the film's really good in a lot of other areas. And again, there's this conversation that's kind of one of the last conversations that's had, and it's over basketball. So we know we're getting to near the end, symmetry-wise, because at the beginning of the film, we saw basketball happening to start the movie. And now we've got that transition, because remember at the beginning we saw Danny Glover in black and white playing basketball in the black and white sequence that started the movie, and now he's playing basketball, it's color, and it's Kevin Kline. So there's this kind of melding of these two worlds, because Kevin Kline was in the color transition shot at the beginning at the LA Lakers game at the Hollywood Forum, at the LA Forum, watching with Steve Martin, who plays Davis, watching the LA Lakers play. And so now there's this full circle combination. There's no LA Laker in this moment, but there is a wannabe LA Laker, I guess, in I guess Danny Glover, perhaps. And here we are, speaking of Danny Glover, he's driving the minivan. All of them are in here. And yes, they are actually in, look, I've been to the Grand Canyon, so I should know. This is actually the Grand Canyon that you're going to see here. And that baby is there. Oh my God, I almost forgot the baby. She got to keep this child. Mazel tov to you, Claire. After everything that I've said. And here's the young brother. He's still trying to find himself in this really violent and racist world. There's the symbolism of the Pittsburgh Pirates hat that Mac talks about. I didn't get into that here, but I love this shot here. It's not all bad. And then we're going to see this crane up over here, and they're all looking at it. They are all watching this. I think this is from the north end of the Grand Canyon, and as you can see, it's all there. They are really in the shot. There is the Grand Canyon. It's not green screened in. That's actually the Grand Canyon. And it looks really nice. That's the Grand Canyon. I do not think that's green screened in or anything. That's the actual Grand Canyon. It's fantastic, isn't it? It's really fantastic. And then you hear that score from James Newton Howard again, and it's just magic. It's really a great score. And we get to see inside the Grand Canyon. And the credits start to roll as we see them there. It's really great to have done this audio commentary. And I hope that you enjoyed listening. 2 hours and almost 15 minutes have passed here. It's incredible, but yeah. And there is Mary Ellen Traynor. I was correct. That is her. She was the, I guess, the psychologist there who was talking, or the job interviewer who was talking to Mary Louise Parker's character, who I still didn't get, and I know I've missed her name in the credits, but anyway, her character's name. But look, it's really been an honor to do this, and thank you so much for listening for these last 2 hours and change. This great score from James Newton Howard cannot be saluted enough. I think this is his best score. I know that he's done a lot of other great work too, that I really love, but I'm a big fan of his, and I'm a big fan of this particular score. It fits really well. And we really get to look at the Grand Canyon. And it's a metaphor for how small our time is on this planet. Not how small we are as people, and maybe that is too, the pettiness, right? When measured up against the Grand Canyon itself as a structure. But it is a metaphor for the gulf between us and the worlds we live in on this planet, particularly here in the United States, but everywhere. And the gulf between rich and poor, which we saw in the film, the gulf between black people and white people because of a racist system that oppresses black people and brown people and poor people and native people and Latinx and, you know, and a number of other groups. I think that Lawrence Kasdan did a very good job here for the most part with Grand Canyon. And I've watched this film every now and again over the years, and I think the film still holds up to a large degree. I think The Big Chill still holds up as well, as does The Accidental Tourist. And certainly Body Heat does. It's a classic film. You've got to familiarize yourself with Lawrence Kasdan's body of work, but I think that this film is really good in of itself, and hopefully it will get the kind of acclaim in years to come that Lawrence Kasdan's other work has. Because this film, I think, stands alone as one of the films that kind of addressed a certain level of social consciousness that some of the filmmakers of 1991 had. 1991 also was a big film year. And I didn't mention that for context. A lot of black filmmakers in 1991, mostly men, did films in 1991, and it was called the New Black Wave. And although ultimately that didn't necessarily pan out the way that it was touted to pan out, there were some great films that year in 1991. Boys in the Hood, by now the late, great John Singleton. There was Spike Lee's Jungle Fever in 1991. There was Straight Outta Brooklyn by Matty Rich in 1991. Matty Rich's career did not last very long in Hollywood. He did one other film, and that was basically, he was two and done. And there were other filmmakers. There was Reginald Hudlin with House Party that year. They have gone on, certainly Reggie Hudlin has gone on to have a very good film career, and he's a producer and a director, and he's done a lot of other things. But Grand Canyon is an important work, I think, and it will stand the test of time years from now. I love the film for the most part. I think it's a great film. And I really thank you for joining me. My name is Omar Moore. I'm on Twitter at @thepopcorn, REEL. Thank you for your time. It's really appreciated.